Councillor Cloutier, it's been less than 12 hours the last time I saw you, so.
Good morning, Councillor El Shantiri. Yes, but we did good work at Board of Health.
Thank you.
True that. No, well, you said less than 12 hours. You know, it's been it was good. We got through it at 7, and Councillor Kavanagh was there also, and
I thought we got off.
It is honestly so much information you leave there with a headache, because there's so much to observe with what's happening, and you try to keep, to take notes. I brought one of my staff just to take note to share with the community some of the questions they asked.
Deanne this morning distributed, I didn't read it, but she had Dr. Etche's verbal update in PDF form this morning, and the presentation. So that's very useful, because the information is fast and furious. Yeah.
Jean, I'm guessing you butt dialed me this morning.
I did. I apologize.
You were looking for a Teams meeting. I'm like, why is Jean Cloutier calling me it?
On the phone, Jeff?
It was a Teams call. Came through on my cell.
A Teams call. Oh.
I'm like,
I apologize.
And then I think you were walking.
I was
walking
out
somewhere.
I was out walking this morning and dropping, and man, that happens all the time. And my phone is my pedometer, so I always have it with me.
So we are live on YouTube.
Thank you, Kevin. So we won't use the terms that Councillor Leeper said, butt dialing.
I think you can say that in public.
I think you can. I think it's a thing.
It's not unparliamentary.
No, it's not the worst.
Jean never butt dials me anymore.
Say again, Matt?
Jean never butt dials me anymore.
There's a country song there somewhere.
There's a song there. There's a song there.
Here I am sitting alone on the floor, wondering why Jean doesn't butt dial me anymore.
So, Councillor Egli, where is the November this year?
It's a very good question, Eli. It's a very good question.
I know your wife would probably said, I'll make a donation. Please don't grow mustache. I just had that feeling anyway.
It could be right. It could be right.
You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Jean, you fixed the video at board last night. Maybe you can fix the mayor's microphone for Fedco.
There you go. Keith, for some reason I was co-host yesterday and I realized that later in the meeting. I don't know why.
Did not
Might
be.
have been. Councillor El Shantir was co-host also. I don't think you want to do that, Chair. That would be there. That's we'll take over the meeting, you know. You know how we can
Always good to have our elders lead us in these things.
Ouch, ouch.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We sure
Yeah,
can.
yes, yes.
Great. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Finance and Economic Development Committee for the 2nd of November. Bienvenue à la réunion du Comité des finances et développement économique pour le 2 novembre 2021. Do we have quorum, Madam Coordinator?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll do a quick roll call. Councillor Conseiller Cloutier,
Présent, Monsieur le maire.
Councillor Derouz,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor El Shantiri,
Present.
Councillor Gower,
Here.
Councillor Hubley,
Here.
Councillor Luloff,
Present.
Councillor Moffat,
Here.
Councillor Tierney,
Present.
Councillor Vice Chair Dudas.
Present.
Declaration of interest, déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. None. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès verbaux pour le 5 octobre 2021, and also for the confidential minutes of October 5th, 2021. Carried.
Yeah.
Carried.
Presentation, Ottawa Board of Trade, we'll come back to that. Anti-racism Secretariat Progress Update, we'll come back to that. Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Services, Heritage Community Improvement Plan, application for 278-280 O'Connor Street. Carried. Adopté.
Carried.
Item 4, Parkdale Market and Byward Market Bylaw Repeal. We have a presentation on that. Delegation of authority, acquisition and sale of land and property, January 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2021. Received.
Received.
Request for additional funds to connect sanitary sewer services to city lands at 4151 and 4201 Albion Road. Carried.
Okay.
Carried.
Demande de participation au programme de subvention pour la remise en valeur des friches industrielles 93 rue Norman. Carried.
Carried.
Adopté. Information previously distributed as presented. And we'll come back to the first item where there's a delegation. This is our annual update from the Ottawa Board of Trade, their strategic plan. And I believe Suling Jin is with us. There she is. Hello, Suling. Suling has been doing great work with our Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force, along with Councillors Dudas and El Shantiri and Harder. And we welcome you to Fedco. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council and the city staff team for the opportunity to update you on the work of the Board of Trade and in particular our new strategic plan. I am joined here this morning by the chair of our Board of Directors, Ian Sherman, who will provide a few remarks, and then either of us would be pleased to receive any comments or questions that you might have. So I would like to begin with a summary of our recent history to provide some context for our new plan. As you know, boards of trade and chambers of commerce have a long-standing tradition for being the primary advocate representing the interests of business in municipalities and jurisdictions around the world. This was the case in Ottawa and the surrounding municipalities pre-amalgamation. However, when the city amalgamated, the corresponding chambers of commerce did not. This resulted in a fragmented voice of business in Ottawa and the watering down of the role of a local chamber. In 2017, the Ottawa chambers began working together and after some success, started working toward consolidation. The case presented to the members of our associations that motivated them to support the consolidation was that the pace and scope of change in the global economy demanded a new approach to business and economic development. And what worked for Ottawa in the past may not help us realize our full potential in the future. In fact, I recall specifically stating that we better hope that nothing big ever happens and we don't have a strong voice of business in Ottawa. In 2018, the Orleans and Ottawa Chamber of Commerce, along with the West Ottawa Board of Trade, we came together in what can only be described as a legacy move for the Ottawa business community. Fast forward to 2020, and something big did indeed happen. The global pandemic has challenged our city and our community in a way no one could have predicted. At the Board of Trade, we immediately diverted all of our attention and resources to supporting our business community through this time. We have done our best to provide key information, advocate for relevant policies and programs at every level of government, and collaborate with business and community leaders to find the next right step. Our volunteers have worked diligently, convening constantly to provide input, strategize, and identify emerging issues and solutions. During this time, we have been so impressed by the innovation and the resilience demonstrated by our local businesses and the collaboration and dedication of our leaders and economic stakeholders. I would like to thank Mayor Watson, Councillors Dudas and El Shantiri for establishing and leading the Mayor's Economic Task Force, and that provided a forum for our stakeholders to stay informed and to find ways to work together. Also, special thanks to Steve Willis and his team for engaging an even wider group of stakeholders and devising the Ottawa Economic Rebound and Recovery Plan. From the perspective of our Board of Trade, all of the city staff that we have encountered have demonstrated the highest levels of cooperation, dedication, and diligence. And I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Mac Ravel and Cindy Van Beskerks, as well as Dr. Etches, Dr. Malahoney, and Ashley Brambles from OPH, who've all maintained the highest level of communication and support for our Board of Trade and for our business community. Throughout the last 20 months, we have been nimble and made adjustments to our work plan. And in many ways, our objectives have been accelerated, including our relationship with our colleagues at the Ontario and the Canadian Chambers, as well as the big city chambers across Canada. Our advocacy work at the provincial and the federal levels of government has increased, and we have kept our eye on the future for our city. And this is why we have forged ahead with our new strategic plan, the first since the formation of the new Ottawa Board of Trade. This plan was created by our board under the leadership of our chair, Ian Sherman, and our now vice chair, Brendan McGinty. We partnered with a well-reputed local firm, Stratford Group, and we're thrilled to have their president and CEO, Jim Roche, and their president of management consulting, Colleen Kelly, agree to lead our project. Our discovery process, which included input from many business and community leaders, has provided us with many insights and a conclusion that there is a strong desire and need for the Board of Trade to level up and deliver the impact that we are uniquely positioned to do. This new plan firmly commits us to our role and responsibility as the voice of business and key advocate for economic growth in our nation's capital. Our mission is to cultivate a thriving, world-class business community in Ottawa by influencing economic development through leadership and partnerships. We've refined our belief system to include 5 values: collaboration, determination, future thinking, integrity, and passion. Finally, our strategy has 3 pillars: unite, influence, and grow. To unite, we will clarify, enhance, and communicate our identity and brand. This includes articulating the value proposition of the Board of Trade, realigning our governance and committee structure, ensuring diversity and inclusion, radical collaboration with economic partners, and a robust communication strategy to ensure the community understands our brand promise. To influence, we will advocate key priorities for the Ottawa business community at all levels of government. This includes the creation of a new advocacy committee to execute member and research-driven priorities and policy positions, a new focus on high-impact initiatives, and the design of thought leadership opportunities. And lastly, to grow. We will expand and diversify our membership and elevate overall engagement, including enhancing the member experience, promoting member benefits, and creating campaigns to expand our sector representation. We will implement a new membership model and funding review process. This plan will guide us over the next 2 years, and we are declaring a call to action for our business and community leaders to work together as we contemplate how we will achieve community prosperity in the new normal and leverage the deep understanding that mental well-being, public health, the environment, equality, and economic growth are all part of this same conversation. It is now my honor to introduce Ian Sherman, the chair of the Ottawa Board of Trade.
Thank you so much, Su-Ling, and as always, thank you for your continued great leadership of our Ottawa Board of Trade. And it is a Board of Trade that belongs to all of us in our community. And I would certainly be remiss if I didn't thank you once again, Mayor Watson, and all of the council members and all of the staff at the city for your ongoing support and dedication to our community. And that support was established well before we even suffered and have been suffering through this pandemic. We've always appreciated your support, and certainly through the pandemic period, it has only been elevated. And I want you to know, on behalf of all of our board of directors, we extend our support to the city as we strengthen the business community and we grow in the right way. I certainly have every confidence that by working together, we are going to realize our full potential as the best national capital in the world. We have so much to offer, and we are going to do it together. I would say that building on our strengths with an inclusive and innovative approach and letting the world know that we are open for business will prove to be a winning combination. We have lots to capitalize on, and a commitment to leadership and radical collaboration is going to be our competitive edge. Certainly internally, we have already begun to work on this plan, the plan that Su-Ling laid out at its highest level. Last month, as we head into this plan, we're proud to say that we elected the most diverse board of directors in our known history. Over 50% of our board is driven by women, young leaders, and visible minorities. And we are going to seize the moment to capitalize on that opportunity to be a much more diverse organization as we move forward. Our next step is going to be to launch our advocacy committee and diversify our membership, again, to ensure that we are growing in the right way. And again, I want to say on behalf of the board of directors, we look forward to working with you in the coming year as we finish this fight with COVID and pave the way for a prosperous and inclusive future for Ottawa, the nation's capital, a leading global city. And thank you for this opportunity to present our plan. And once again, Su-Ling, thank you for your wonderful leadership and collegiality with our board of directors and our stakeholders.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. We'll open it up to questions. Councillor Dudas, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just can't say enough how important the strong voice of the Ottawa Board of Trade, COBIA, RGA, and all of the members of the task force have been in terms of helping the city move through this pandemic. This has been a very strong source of collaboration and insight into the needs of our business community. And I think the Ottawa Board of Trade, since amalgamation, has proven to be a formidable advocate and ally to all businesses throughout our city. So I'm very, very excited to hear about the work that you've done. Your strategic plan sounds exciting, and I love to hear about the diversity on your board. And I think that that's truly representative of the city that we're living in. I did have one question in that, you know, we've been hearing a lot about the impacts of the pandemic. the presentation that you just gave is very positive in tone. And I was wondering, in terms of our business community, is that kind of the emotive reaction that you're hearing, that people are looking more positively towards our recovery going forward?
Well, should I answer that, Ian?
Yeah, why don't you comment?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sure. Laura, just as it's been throughout this pandemic, we have various sectors of our business community, right, who have been hit very differently throughout this last 20 months. And I think in terms of the view moving forward, there's an overall sense of optimism that, we've had high vaccination rates in Ottawa. We have demonstrated, I think, an ability to work together really well and to advocate to other levels of government together. And so I think that provides some optimism. But there are still many businesses that are struggling, and they have a hard few months ahead of them still. And that's why we are continuing to advocate for support for them as well.
Well, I very much appreciate your ongoing voices around that task force table and in general in terms of the community. And I will be looking to continue that collaboration even after the pandemic. I think that we have a very strong task force working forward, and I look forward to having those continued conversations with all.
I appreciate that.
If I could just add one other dimension to all of this, one emotion that has come through very strongly over the past 18 months is this emotion of all of us as stakeholders collaborating and partnering and working together, not only to come out of the pandemic, but as a vision for the future. And so there's tremendous support for the work that we are doing from a collaborative perspective, and our business community would like us to continue to work in that fashion, whether it's with the city, other stakeholders in the community, some of whom you mentioned, Councillor Dudas, et cetera. And we're committed to that vision, and that was why we went into amalgamation in the first instance.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Dudas?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you very much for the presentation and for all your work. I'm pleased. I just wanted to make a comment that I was pleased to see again in the representation on gender equity, and that there's more women and perhaps others who are involved. I should know the answer, but what is the representation overall of women entrepreneurs in the city? Is there anybody has any idea? Because I was curious overall, because certainly you're trying to be representative. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I appreciate the efforts that you're making to be more representative of those who are there.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. And I know I look forward to working with you in your leadership and gender diversity. And do I know exactly what that number is? No, I don't. But maybe that's perhaps something that we could work on together. And I can tell you that my colleagues at the Ontario Chamber have done a tremendous amount of research and work on this in this area as well. So we can leverage that for Ottawa as well.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Me
Thank
too.
you.
Councillor Fleury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning. Thank you, Su-Ling and Ian, for the presentation. I'm thinking deeper in terms of Board of Trade's influence with federal decision makers in the coming months, specifically as it relates to downtown offices. And as the board, just so I understand, as the Board of Trade formalized the request of what that should look like for our city. I was just getting coffee this morning, and I went into the old Bell building on Elgin and looked at the food court and some of the businesses in that space, thinking like, hey, what's going on, right? It's some of the most challenging times still for many of those retail businesses in the downtown core. So curious to hear from you on the broader Board of Trade's effort relating to one of the biggest employers in coming back to downtown offices.
Thank you, Councillor. Our advocacy on that front has not been formal, more informal, in presentations that we've been doing overall around the recovery. and staying in touch with the mayor's office and other stakeholders on that advocacy. It is a unique situation for us in Ottawa. And we have been promoting, though, the idea of getting back to work in general, and in particular supporting programs like rapid testing, the post-promise, so that there is a support overall for SMEs in the downtown core and business district.
Okay, and thank you for that. And your wishes in that respect is to go back to pre-pandemic activity, or it's something different? Sorry, I just want to understand that deeper.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what we're trying to get a handle on with, frankly, not just the government as an employer, but all employers, is what the appetite is for return to office. And I can tell you that even CEOs that we have met with that have a national mandate are struggling with how to get back to the office in a safe way, in a way that supports what their workforce wants to do, and that they can retain that workforce. So I think our position overall with the government and with all employers is to encourage people to get back to the office, to do it in a safe way, and to look for policies and programs that will allow them to do that. Because it's also a question of employee confidence. That is, we've talked a lot about consumer confidence, business confidence, but now as we start to contemplate going back to work, employee confidence is a big part of that. And we're working with some stakeholders on trying to develop a strategy around that right now.
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of we're hours away from the draft budget being presented, and we have to look at our areas, we have to look at different sectors and so on. What indications or what objectives would you like us to keep in mind going into this year's budget for businesses? I know in the past, the mayor and the city's team and council has done important things, specifically in the last year as it relates to waiver of patio fees and so on, that have gone a long way. We've heard that directly. Are there other measures that you think we need to look at for this year?
Well, I would say that we are looking forward to deepening our collaboration on the budget building process. I want to commend the city on being sensitive to any opportunity that they could take, particularly these last 20 months, to support the business community. And I know there is not a lot of room for the municipality to move in that regard. I would say a few things. Whatever we can do to derive service excellence in terms of serving our business community, to have a message of being open for business, particularly post-pandemic, and looking for ways to create an environment in which our private sector can drive the recovery for Ottawa. And so for our local government as much as possible, and frankly for our Ontario and federal government, what we're really looking to do is for the government to see themselves in a way of looking at policies and programs that will encourage private sector investment that will drive the recovery moving forward.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Suling, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Merci. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Suling and Ian, for your presentation. Suling, obviously, we want to thank you again for your leadership on the Mayor's Task Force as well. With your colleagues. One of the areas I really want to emphasize your support and help for the small businesses as well. As we all know, they've been through. Now, with the cities taking the action by reducing the taxes on the small businesses, and have we heard any, or have you heard any feedback from the folks? Is it been well used? Because we know sometimes also the engagement of the landlord. We want to make sure that, in your opinion, this is going in the right direction.
I'll be honest, I think it's still new. I think we did promote it when it came out, and we will continue to emphasize it as a strategy that the City of Ottawa is using to be open for business. So we will continue to monitor that. I haven't had a tremendous amount of feedback as yet, but I can say to you that I personally was really impressed with the process that the city took in designing that program, because it had the potential to have some offsetting unintended consequences, if you will, if we had gone forward in a simple way. But the tremendous amount of consultation to arrive at our final plan, we were very appreciative of. And I know that Ottawa is a leader in the Ontario network for moving forward on this, and I think you should be commended in doing it in such a thoughtful way.
Thank you, Susan. And Mr. Mayor, maybe something we need your help with, maybe, you know, to follow up on Councillor Fleury, to start the dialogue with the federal government and the local government and you know, and your task force to see how could we start promoting and encouraging people to come back to work, because I have to agree that the businesses in the downtown, they are suffering severely, and I can I mean, the number is over 40% of them will never return. So I'm not sure if the mayor's task force thinking about having a meeting with our new elected MPs and have that discussion and dialogue. I think that would be a step in the right direction, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor El Chantiri and Councillor Fleury. I did speak with Minister Duclos, the previous president of the Treasury Board, prior to the election, to express our concern about the need to get public servants back into the downtown core. And fortunate for us, the new president of the Treasury Board is a local MP, the Honourable Mona Fortier, and I've talked to her about it, and she understands very well the situation, because she has downtown core of Rideau Street, Montreal Road, Beechwood, and so on. So we'll continue those dialogues because obviously a lot of these small businesses rely on a large number of people working and living in the downtown core. So we'll continue on that. I just wanted to say to Su Ling and Ian, thank you very much for your positive contributions to our Economic Recovery Task Force, working with Invest Ottawa, the distribution of rapid test kits, the Shop Local, Visit Local campaigns done with Ottawa Tourism and other groups, the tax cut work that you worked on with us, and things like the Hub 350 in Canada that just opened officially, that is going to act as a great incubator for business development, not just in the West End, but throughout the whole city. So you've been very busy with a very small staff, and we very much appreciate the long hours that you and your colleagues and your volunteer members like Ian and others, the countless number of hours you put into meeting with us. And I think, you know, Eli and Laura and Jan, who sit on that economic task force, understand when we get into that room, even though it's virtually, it really is all of the heavy hitters in the economic development field, whether it's Regroupement des Gens d'Affaires, Invest Ottawa, the Film Office, the OMIC, the Board of Trade, and so on. The list is quite impressive, and people are sending their most senior people to that group, and we very much appreciate it. The Council of BIA is another great example. So thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate the collaborative approach. Look forward to working with you over the next year. Merci. So our next item is the Parkdale Market and Byward Market bylaw. It wasn't a presentation, it was a delegation. My apologies. So we have Zach Daler, who's well known to many of us, who is going to speak on behalf of the bylaw repeal and replacement. So Zach, good morning. You even have a tie on. This is a big day.
Good morning, everybody. I believe I was on mute there. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity today to address the bylaw repeal and replacement with our operating procedure. For those of you who've been around the council table for some time, this has been a discussion that's been ongoing really since 2008 for the better part of 13 years. And there's been a number of different changes and adjustments as we've gone on. Fast forward to the creation of Ottawa Markets, which is the city's municipal service corporation, responsible for reinvigorating and reigniting our outdoor markets program, anchored both at Byward and Parkdale. And the work that we've been engaging with over the last year and a half under COVID, beyond trying to make the market work as best we can in both locations, is putting together a series of rules and guidelines that are clear for the rebuild that is required for both Byward and Parkdale. Markets and market programs have changed dramatically over the years, from the proliferation of grocery stores to single-day markets. And really, to be frank, in Byward, we haven't evolved that program over the years. And so we're beginning to do that work. And again, it is timely with the recovery efforts of COVID. The operating procedure, I'll highlight sort of three major components that I think are really important to our rebuild efforts in front of you. The first is our Farmers First policy. And again, farmers will receive and do receive the lowest vending fee rates in the city to attend our markets. They also will receive and do receive preferential placement on the market. One of the things that we need to do through both stimulus spending and subsidy spending is help encourage and rebuild that program of selling produce on the market, but across the board for makers, bakers, growers of all kinds. Again, evolving what our understanding is of the market more into a public space, public market space, where it is welcoming for everyone from the most affluent to those who just need to be in space. The second point that I'll highlight is we've built into our operating procedure a yearly update cycle. So as a municipal service corporation, council are our members. One of the challenges with the previous bylaw was that it would be outdated, or it became outdated very quickly as you moved from 2008 through to 2013. Not that amendments couldn't be made. But our process of review kickstarts a cycle of getting feedback, coming to our membership council, talking about those things and updating our operating procedure as is required. The third piece that I will highlight in our operating procedure is a goal to try and program our areas or our spaces in partnership with our community partners and other groups. These spaces are really important to the city. Byward, almost 200 years old, where the city started. And so through our market program and our outdoor program and the operating procedure, having the flexibility to work with community groups to bring them into the space to help activate it. And again, perhaps a fourth one that I'll highlight here just very briefly is we've also made it very clear our enforcement procedures. One of the challenges of the previous bylaw was how do we actually enforce some of these measures? We've built in a very clear point system for vendors. And again, we've shifted our program to incentivize and focus on local. And our wholesaling program no longer is allowed to sell anything that is not a Canadian product, and is sort of triaged in the idea of Canadian, provincial, and regional in terms of product on the market. So this operating procedure represents a number of discussions with community members, community groups, BIAs, vendors. It is in some regards very similar to the repeal. But as I mentioned, that flexibility to be able to update it and to maintain a sense of authority over the rules that we put in place on the market are going to be very important as we rebuild. And have no illusions, we are in a rebuild phase. There are a number of challenges that we're facing. However, things like the public realm plan, the operating procedure, the good work of Ottawa tourism and the rebound to bring people back are all positive sort of wind to help push us up that hill. And the view from the top is going to be great. So I'll conclude by thanking city staff, the Economic Development Department as a whole, through to planning staff. It is very clear everybody working at the city is really passionate about both Byward and Parkdale. and even more passionate about growing our market program as a core piece of what draws people to Ottawa from the past, but also into the future. So we really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and we hope that we can move forward on this policy, again, helping us achieve our mandate, which is to reinvigorate and reignite our markets program in the city. Thank you very much for your time, and happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Zach. Appreciate that. Is there des questions? Any questions? Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Mr. Maire. Stacy, plutôt un commentaire. I want to thank Zach. If any of you were in the market last weekend, you see the potential of Ottawa markets and what Zach and the team are doing. We had the Day of the Dead, and it was a number of activities, outdoors, indoors, arts. There was a food tasting and artisans. So Zach, you bring a lot of confidence in the repeal because of the number of initiatives that you brought forward. I'm confident, and if anything, it hyper focuses us on back to being able to deliver the public realm plan, which would be amazing ahead of the market celebration in 2027. So thank you for that. I'm certainly supportive of the ask today. Thank you, Mr.
Kavanaugh. Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh, the floor is yours.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your comments. Everybody loves a market, and I noted that you said you're looking at growing. I do hear from people that they'd like more. They'd like more markets, and they want that local. And I have heard from representatives of farmers that say that there are farmers that can't get a spot in the markets that are there because they're all filled up. So I think there's room to grow. It's just finding locations. So I hope that can happen. In the West End, I know that we do have Westboro, but there's still an appetite for more. So I'd love to work with you on that opportunity. I think that we can still grow. I know that when I was in London, England, a few years ago, I looked up where the markets were. So that was how I toured the city, was to find the markets. So it gave you an opportunity to see different communities. And I think that's an opportunity too. I don't know if you want to make any comment on that.
I never pass down an opportunity to comment, so thank you. But we do feel that there is a lot of opportunity to grow and expand our work. And the only comment I'll add is we've had some success trying that out in the past year. We had a really positive market in Raven Park that we did in partnership with Councillor Brockington that went very well, and we'll look to bring back next season on a limited basis. We also partnered with Dominion City in Councillor Tierney's ward, I believe, to have a pop-up market at their brewery. And the point that I'll make is, as a municipal service corporation, we haven't necessarily grown into this space yet, but we do view ourselves as a resource for the city. So for instance, if the city was to talk about affordable housing, you would go to your municipal service corporation, that is Ottawa Community Housing, to engage with them as a partner. And we do see ourselves hopefully growing into that space to partner with you on these important topics of food security, getting access to product out there, because the market and labor has changed in that 7 days a week is very difficult in some locations. You know, how can we best use those day markets? How can we best use those markets around the city to promote the core market, being here in Byward, and then of course Parkdale. And then I do want to note, for us, it's not about competition or revenue. It's about developing a coordinated program that educates the city about the importance of food, whether that be our national food chain, provincial or regional and local farmers. So happy to connect with any councillor that would like to talk about that a little bit further. We're definitely a partner to help make that happen.
Great, thank you. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'll just make a really quick comment. So thank you, Zach, for the work that you've been doing for the past couple of years. Our markets are now in the hands of the Municipal Service Corporation, which was a great move. I think the last council approved doing that. And as I know, in Kitchissippi, we have the Westboro Farmers Market, which is extraordinarily popular and really responds well to what the market is demanding. And I think had we stayed the course with the Byward and Parkdale markets, those would have become increasingly moribund. The move to put it into the hands of a Municipal Services Corporation to eliminate the bureaucratic hurdles to be nimble and creative is the right move to take. And we've seen it in things like the night market. And Zach, thank you so much for working with me on things like street closures around the night market. And, you know, that became a very, very popular destination. I do hope that my colleagues will support the repeal of the bylaw, implementing the new operating procedure that gives the market the kind of flexibility that it needs in order to respond to market demand. And I just want to say thank you, Zach, for the creativity and the energy that you've brought to the Parkdale market for the past couple of years. It's only going to grow into a more and more popular neighborhood spot.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Lulov, please.
Hey, Zach, thanks for coming out today to chat with us about this. I really do appreciate it. My residents for the past couple of years have been so pleased with our market here at the Raphael Center in Orléans on Thursdays, and they're very interested in seeing that market not only expand but expand its hours of operation. Right now, it currently only runs till 4 p.m. And so for many people that work a 9 to 5 or a 10 to 6 have trouble going out to support our local farmers. And I'm wondering if there's anything in the works to maybe extend that to 7 p.m. or to 6 p.m. To allow more people to be able to enjoy the incredible vendors and farmers that come out every Thursday.
Thanks for the question. So just a minor point of clarification. We don't run or operate that market space. That's one of those single day markets. However, as a municipal service corporation, it is really important for us to reach out to those markets, to work with them. Saying perhaps we have the resources as this central group. How can we work with that group to perhaps bring in more staffing or support sort of the vendor swap in terms of markets to provide really what folks are looking for. So we'll absolutely reach out to that team and see what we can do there. And if we can't do anything sort of related to that, we'd be happy to look at doing an alternate day to bring some of our vendors down there as well.
That'd be wonderful. I'd really like to sit down and maybe chat with you. So I'll have Jordan in my office reach out to you. I think that would be really wonderful and really appreciate your partnership. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dudas, please.
Thanks, Zachary. I just have a very simple question. You had mentioned about food security and about supporting local farmers. I was just curious, and forgive me if you had previously mentioned it. Do you collaborate with Just Food in relation to any of the? Perfect.
Yeah, so that's a relationship that we would really like to grow. And I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but I believe the last interaction that we had with that group was when we launched our BIPOC Farmers Initiative. And they helped us sort of push that program out to various communities to help create access. Also just met with the Lowertown Community Association Resource Center, and they do some interesting things with that group as well. So as we go forward, part of our work is the outdoor space of Byward and Parkdale, and we'd like to bring in some more of that community garden type program and education type program that we know groups like Just Food and others sort of offer. So a natural partnership that I think once we can sort of get comfortable in our operating procedure, we can begin to understand how we bring these groups in as whether sort of official partners or unofficial partners. But absolutely a really wonderful group operating in this city.
That's excellent, because I think once again, collaboration is key. I've spoken about that in a different item, and I know that our city is, has many entities working on different aspects of this. And once again, just that ongoing partnership will strengthen all of them. All boats will float, all will rise, right? So thank you very much, Zach, for everything you do. I take my family down to the markets all the time. Absolutely love it. So appreciate your work.
Great, thank you. Thank you again, Zach. On the committee recommendations, carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you. Our final item is the Anti-Racism Secretariat Progress Update. We have Donna and Suzanne who have a presentation, and we'll ask Donna to begin the presentation, and welcome. Looking forward to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Suzanne Obiora, our Director for the Strategy, will be presenting today. So I'll hand it over to Suzanne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Donna. I am pleased to join you this morning to share a recent milestone that has been achieved within our Anti-Racism Secretariat. And the purpose of this information report is to provide an update on completing 8 months of engagement that took place within the community and among city staff, as well as the creation of a community-based anti-racism advisory table and the release of our What We Heard report. Next slide, please. So as a city, we strive to achieve a reflective workforce, nurture an inclusive work culture, and ensure all employees experience a sense of belonging. And we work with the understanding that building an inclusive workforce ensures that a diversity of minds, experiences, and perspectives are shaping and leading the city's operations and services to best meet the needs of city staff and Ottawa residents. As a corporation, we understand that systemic racism presents itself as patterns of behavior, policies, or practices that are part of the structures of an organization which create or perpetuate disadvantage for racialized people. And so the objective of our Anti-Racism Secretariat is to develop a strategy that will target systemic racism through policy change, decision-making, program evaluation, and outcome measures. The strategy will be broad and robust as it seeks to consider the complexity in confronting racism within Indigenous communities and within Black, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, and other racialized communities, and will be a foundational underpinning towards a broader equity framework. To date, our Secretariat has performed various anti-racism education and awareness initiatives. We've participated in a variety of collaborative initiatives within the corporation and within the city. And most recently, as I mentioned, we've completed 2 phases of engagement and pulled together our anti-racism advisory table. Next slide, please. So our strategy will have both an internal and external facing component. And our approach is anchored in keeping the voices of the people who have been historically marginalized at the center of this conversation. Over the past 8 months, we've held numerous action planning sessions, hearing from approximately 600 residents and community stakeholders. And we've also hosted 15 sessions with city staff and management to identify priority areas to address systemic racism within the organization. And to understand the barriers unique to Indigenous communities and ensure the voices of Indigenous residents are included in the creation of the strategy, a separate process was used through an Indigenous-led consultant firm. We were unable to engage as extensively as we'd hoped, and recognizing the importance of a higher participation rate, we will conduct additional engagement that will include an urban Indigenous engagement framework to build on priorities as established by the Indigenous community. Next slide, please. So our engagement findings are organized by the 6 strategic priorities in which the strategy is meant to address. And I won't go through all of the priorities here, but just to give you some examples of the recommendations that surfaced through these action planning sessions. As it relates to employment equity, participants highlighted the low representation of racialized people in stable, high-paying jobs, leadership positions, and knowledge-based and technology sectors, mirrored by overrepresentation in low-paying, temporary, and precarious jobs, as well as among those who are unemployed. And so recommended actions include increased hiring, promotion, and retention of racialized staff within the City of Ottawa, establishing clear benchmarks and targets to track progress, and removing applicant barriers, diversifying the jobs that are promoted, and access to support, mentorship, and networks. In terms of economic development, participants highlighted barriers to economic development that includes systemic exclusion based on race and a lack of diversity among business improvement areas, hindering economic inclusion. And so recommended actions include business development and mentorship programs for racialized community, applying an equity lens to city contract allocations, and allocating funding and grants to diverse businesses. And then I'll just provide the example around youth development. As we know, many factors and disparities affect the well-being and mental health of youth. This could be related to intergenerational trauma, a lack of resources or lack of access to resources, digital inequities, and so on. And so some of the recommendations include increasing the availability and diversity of resources and programs for youth outside of school hours in their communities, and looking to implement a youth advisory table so that city programs and policies are created or informed through a youth perspective, as some examples. Next slide, please. So we heard from Ottawa residents and community partners that addressing systemic racism is a complex, interconnected, and multifaceted endeavor. And yet the city can be a leader in addressing systemic racism, and the community is ready to support this work. Residents want to see transparency in our equity work. They want to be continuously involved and engaged in our process and see actions to validate that the city is listening. Residents want to see councillors engaging more with racialized communities. They want to see themselves reflected throughout the corporation and see better representation within our governance structures. And they are asking for accountability through established metrics and through the monitoring of our progress using accurate and timely race disaggregated data. Next slide, please. To translate the community feedback into action, an anti-racism advisory table has been created who will bring forward their knowledge, perspectives, and experiences to inform the development of the strategy. There's a wide diversity of participants on the table from a variety of professions, educational backgrounds, and lived experiences. And this table is made up of 10 leaders from organizations or groups with mandates to serve racialized communities, as well as 7 individual contributors recognized as leaders within their community who have expertise and a record of accomplishment in leading positive change. In addition to our community representation, we also have 7 city staff. So the organizations represented on our table have broad mandates serving racialized communities. This includes community health services, newcomer and settlement services. We have organizations advancing and promoting a better quality of life for Jewish residents, providing housing and basic social services, youth training, social enterprises, and organizations providing mental health and addiction services to Francophone families and individuals. Next slide, please. This is just a full listing of our advisory table membership from the community membership. Individual contributors have expertise in areas including newcomers and settlement services for youth and families, anti-Indigenous racism, advocacy, public policy, law, community development, social impact funding, and advancing social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in Ottawa and at a national level. And so you will see a complete bios of the members within the report package. Membership on the table was chosen using an intersectional lens to ensure representation reflects Ottawa's diversity through different races, ethnicities, genders, ages, languages, abilities, geographic location, and identities within the 2SLGBTQIA community. But by all accounts, we are quite grateful with the caliber of expertise and diversity that have offered their time and experience to lead and shape this strategy. We've also engaged with the facilitator group, well known in the Ottawa community, who has a strong anti-racism expertise, and through a trauma-informed lens will create the right environment to navigate some of the difficult conversations in which we'll embark on, and ensure that our conversations are taking place in a respectful and purposeful manner, steering us into proposed solutions and action items for the city. Next slide, please. So through our internal engagement, 4 themes emerged. Again, we heard that the city can be a leader in addressing systemic racism within the corporation, but that all employees at all levels need to be ready to support and engage in this work. We heard that experiences of racism in the workplace are affecting our staff's work and their well-being. Racialized staff feel burdened with the responsibility to identify and address racism when it happens. But through proactive leadership and supportive allyship, we can ensure psychological safety for all staff. Participants described how a lack of awareness and education about racism among staff and management manifests through unconscious bias, defensiveness, and fear of difficult conversations. Management and non-racialized staff do not always feel they have the knowledge, skills, or tools to address racism or safely engage in these conversations without unintentionally causing harm. Consequently, we heard that leaders and staff need training, tools, and common language for addressing racism in the workplace and within our programs and services. We heard clear calls for concrete practices to address our hiring processes to improve representation at the supervisor level and above, as well as a need and desire for supportive mentorship and career planning for racialized staff. And then finally, we heard a need for clear processes to name and address racism in the workplace. Existing processes for reporting and addressing racism are perceived as difficult to navigate, and there are recommendations for having clear language, terms, and processes for naming and addressing racism with clear rules and guidelines for management and staff. That includes follow-up and monitoring. The internal engagement revealed that staff and leaders are curious and want to learn more about the experiences of racialized staff at the city, and there's a desire to contribute towards the work of the Anti-Racism Secretariat, and many managers expressed a sense of responsibility to self-educate and support. Next slide, please. So over the next 3 months, our team will host a series of resident and staff town halls to begin socializing the themes and feedback that we heard through the engagement sessions. We plan to host a series of resident town halls to do further engagement with intersectional groups such as youth, the Francophone, and the 2SLGBTQIA community, as well as doing some key stakeholder engagement with OLIP and our Community Champions Table Network as some examples. We'd like to report back to the community and validate what we've heard over the past 8 months and confirm the proposed actions and assess whether there are any gaps in what we're proposing, as well as seek an additional opportunity for some more feedback to inform our strategy. We believe the discourse in these town halls need to be about our overall goal of systemic changes to achieve racial equity within the corporation and across the city. And so we will engage experts well known in the field of equity and anti-racism who hold an in-depth understanding of how racism manifests, and they will establish the right conditions for us to engage in dialogue that shares the findings, validates the feedback in the report, and provides some education on how to engage in anti-racism work and how to engage in these uncomfortable conversations and establish some common language. In collaboration with the Anti-Racism Advisory Table, the anti-racism strategy will be developed and presented to FEDCO in Q2 of 2022, which will include strategic actions, key performance indicators, and expected outcomes. Next slide, please. So it's important to note that we don't need to wait for the strategy to be developed to begin this work, and change is starting to take shape. And I'll just offer a few examples. We've piloted our Lead It strategic hiring process to accelerate our workforce representation objectives within 4 departments, and are on track for corporate implementation of the strategic hiring process in Q3 of 2022. We've integrated an equity lens into our succession planning processes. This fall, we implemented bias awareness training for leaders. And we've also implemented a revised community funding allocation process that emphasizes an equity component and have been funding grassroots organizations serving Black and racialized communities. So, Mr. Mayor, if I may take a moment to thank my staff for the tremendous work they've done and been able to accomplish this past year, and extend my gratitude to the support of Donna Gray, our GM and executive sponsor, as well as the city manager and senior leadership team. Advancing equity work is difficult and begins with the most senior leaders championing and sponsoring this work. We are pleased to have shared this update on the progress of the Anti-Racism Secretariat and recommend that Council receive this report for information. And that brings us to the end. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you very much, Suzanne. It's very thorough and done all at the same time as we're dealing with a pandemic. So you've had to do almost all of your consultation through outreach through Zoom and virtual means, but it's very impressive. Councillor King is the council liaison. Would you like to begin?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, everybody. And thank you to Donna and Suzanne for your presentation and for this progress report. I'm very pleased that Council continues to see the Anti-Racism Secretariat evolve as a resource to address systemic barriers experienced by Black, Indigenous, and racialized people in the city. The development of the Secretariat was based upon a specific request from Ottawa's diverse Black communities in the wake of increasing incidents of hate within the city in 2019, before COVID, to create a policy office with the objective of eliminating systemic racism in our municipal government operations and services. The establishment of a secretariat demonstrates concrete action to address racism and discrimination in Ottawa, especially anti-Black racism, anti-Asian racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and discrimination that Indigenous people face. During initial consultations with many diverse communities across Ottawa, I heard requests for the city to address challenges concerning employment equity, equity in governance, housing, economic development, health outcomes, and youth development. And I'm pleased that these are the main strategic focus areas for both the Secretariat and the city's first anti-racism strategy that the Secretariat is developing for Council's ratification for next year. And I'm also pleased that consultation continues with community members through the creation of an advisory table. And I'm also really gratified that the scope of consultation is extensive through action planning sessions and through staff meetings. So I was just curious, in this vein, can staff elaborate on how the city is going to enhance outreach, especially with the racialized two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, and asexual community, along with the racialized community with disabilities?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In the third phase of our engagement, in addition to the town halls, we will be hosting some smaller focused outreach sessions. And one of our goals is to engage further with racialized communities with intersectional identities, such as racialized members from the 2S LGBTQIA community, and seek to further engage with racialized communities with disabilities. One distinction that we'll be making in this phase is that we'll be looking to engage with these groups where they already meet, gather, and are most comfortable in expressing themselves, to remove any barriers to participation. So instead of asking from members of the community to come and join spaces that the city is creating, the city will be working in partnership with various community groups to see if we can join within their spaces to hear more specifically from them. And we also will be engaging community partners and stakeholders in order to hear about the trends they are seeing in the community and the feedback they are hearing from their service users on barriers that they've experienced. And so actions to address these inequities or any gaps that are noted in our What We Heard report. We hope to further elevate in an attempt to further elevate the voices of these communities.
Well, I really appreciate the work that you're undertaking in terms of outreach. I think that culturally sensitive and group sensitive approaches to consultation is key. I've heard that on multiple occasions, and I'm very pleased that we're taking that approach to get some more meaningful input into the process. I know with the city budget being due to be tabled tomorrow, I've heard from many community members. In fact, during my recent budget consultation for the Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities about the need to introduce priority services that have a culturally focused lens. And I know that you were speaking to that in your report. I was just wondering if you can describe how the funding models are changing to address equity needs, especially around health and housing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So our new community funding framework aligns with priorities that have been validated through a consultation process and approved via council. And an explicit principle of this new framework is an equity and inclusion lens. And so the new community funding framework does prioritize services delivered to and by equity deserving groups, including Indigenous, Black, and racialized communities. So leading into 2022, the city will be providing sustainability funding to 22 new agencies. These agencies will be added to our community funding framework, all of whom have mandates to serve equity deserving groups. The funded agencies will be required to submit outcome reports, including the demographics of the clients served through disaggregated data. And so capturing things like race, gender, age, and other data points. And just, as it relates to items concerning health, the priorities of the new community funding framework include poverty reduction, community development, and social infrastructure. And the overall mission of the framework is to increase residents' health and well-being. So we know long before residents enter the healthcare system, there's a variety of social factors that impact and determine their health, which is what the community funding framework is meant to address. The priorities within the Sustainability Fund include mental well-being, poverty reduction, social inclusion, food security, and equitable systems and structures. There is also significant investment in community hubs who have very strong equity mandates as well. And Mr. Mayor, if I may just pass it over to Donna Gray to speak a little bit about the housing component.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor, the housing is one of the priorities in the plan as we move forward. And so housing staff will be working with the Anti-Racism Secretariat to really review our policies and processes around funding. Much of the funding that we have is prioritized for populations based on provincial guidelines, but we still believe that there may be opportunities to look at that. But in addition, we're really excited to be launching in the coming weeks an RFP specifically for a Black-led housing provider for affordable housing development, particularly for families. And really the intent of that is to start to look at opportunities to build the housing provider sector for the capacity for building affordable housing. But also that pilot includes discussions with Black-led organizations to ensure that the supports and services that we're providing to families, both in our shelter systems, but also in affordable housing, actually reflect the needs of those communities. So I think we're really excited to be working with the Anti-Racism Secretariat, the housing group, and it definitely was top of the list of the priorities that the team started to discuss already in the early meetings of the Anti-Racism Secretariat, which I know you started to be engaged in those as well, Councillor.
Great, thank you. Councillor El Shantiri, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Suzanne, for your presentation and also for your meeting with some of us. My question on, I believe, is page 11, when you talk about economic development, and it just caught my attention when you say the lack of diversity among businesses improvement area, BIAs. Can you elaborate a little bit on this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just, Councillor, may you clarify if you're looking in the What We Heard report or the anti-racism report, just so I'm
well, this is your
able
report.
to.
This is your report today. Sorry, I'm just.
Was it the slide 11, Councillor?
No, page 11 of the report, Mr. Mayor.
Oh.
Well, of the information report.
That's right.
Okay.
Because it just got my attention. Let me maybe help you out why I'm saying this. To my understanding, a lot of the business improvement area, or a lot of those businesses is owned or operated by new Canadian, new immigrant, newcomers. And I don't understand your observation here. So I'm hoping you can explain it better, include those who are highly educated and senior. Like, what are you trying to say here? Like, I don't know.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is feedback that's coming directly from the community as it relates to access to business development and business growth, and access to learning opportunities on how to effectively start a new business, and also what sort of access is available in effectively running businesses. So this comes directly from our consultations, where there is an interest and desire in more resources, not only to start businesses, but opportunities to effectively run businesses. Some of the comments that came through the community feedback were also related to ethnoculturally specific business improvement areas. So one example was that there isn't, a BIA specifically for African Caribbean Black communities, and what sort of opportunities may exist to provide additional supports for racialized communities as they aim to start and maintain businesses.
But you do know other racialized community, they have their own, whether they call it business association, or we have the Pakistani, we have the Indian, we have the Lebanese. I mean, we have so many. I'm not sure if they are part of the large organized BIA, but I mean, they do exist. Now the question is, how can we bring them in?
And I think part of it is, thank you, Mr. Mayor, access to information, a recognition of what exists. And, the diversity of racialized communities is so vast and so broad that there's, certainly some interest with some of the racialized communities to have more targeted and focused business supports, access to mentorship, access to grants and fundings to start and maintain their businesses. So I think part of this, Councillor, is increased information of resources that are available, but also much of this is focused on certain racialized communities who have not had access to these supports and are looking for some guidance and direction.
Well, in the past, and maybe Donna can help me with this since she was here before, we used to have the entrepreneurship office and helping people, whether new Canadian or ordinary Canadian, who need to open a business and they don't know how to go through the red tape. So I thought we had the entrepreneurship, and it was helpful to have a new beginners in the business to help out with half an hour, whether with the city staff who can, talk about all the challenges to open a new business. Do we still have any things like this, Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a number of programs that help people support people to do business and across the city and in different areas. I think the intent of this and what Suzanne is highlighting in the approach is that these are perceptions that get raised in the community. And how we're approaching it is, in this particular item in the economic development that you're talking about, we would go back and prepare a briefing to the Anti-Racism Secretariat of all the supports and services and organizations that currently exist in the city and what we're doing. So they would start with a really clear understanding, because some of it is just perception or lack of information. And that would be the first starting point to discuss, to say, in that information, are there any gaps, or are there ways that we can enhance our communication out to businesses and entrepreneurs and business communities to then deal with the pieces in this strategy. So it's not saying that those things don't exist, but there is a perception, and we want to make sure that we bring all that fulsome information back to the Secretariat for both their understanding and the community's understanding of what the city currently does.
I see Mr. Willis have his hand up, maybe.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I can just supplement what Donna just said, because it's exactly the support we're providing to Donna and Suzanne and the team. I also want to give a specific credit to Invest Ottawa, who've done some very targeted programs in this area, and that is part of their mandate. And we provide support and funding for Invest Ottawa as part of their efforts. So they have done outreach, and as Donna indicated, we need to make sure that the groups who are identifying through the strategy are aware of the programs that Invest Ottawa is doing. So we have to address that awareness gap. So just to supplement what Donna said.
Thank you, but Mr. Mayor, one of the area I think I've been in Ottawa for a long time, and we're always hear about this, and I'm not sure if it's just a perception or it's a fact, and it's nothing to do really with the city itself. But I mean, how many times we heard high educated folks from another country, they're driving taxi or running a restaurant or something because they cannot get employment equivalent to what their profession is, whether you're a lawyer, engineer, doctor, nurses so, and I don't see anything about this. Am I missing something? I went through the report and we talk about this. I know here you said including those who are highly educated and senior, but have we give up on that? And I know we had before tried to work with the federal government, with the provincial government, tried to help people with high education and high qualification to be able to work here, even if it means go back and have a little bit equivalent, Canadian equivalent. Is this report touch on anything like this?
Mr. Mayor, if I may assist Donna and Suzanne on this, although the report wouldn't have talked about it, the province introduced new legislation last week that would significantly open up regulated professions to international experience. That's the biggest move we've seen in any length of time across a very broad range of professions. And I think it deals with the question the councillor raises head on. And really, because the province controls most of the regulated professions, they're very much in the driver's seat for making this happen. So this new provincial legislation is incredibly encouraging and could address some of the issues that we're doing. Not all of the issues, but it's a big step forward.
Thank you, Mr. Willett. But since this is honestly, I didn't even hear that, but I mean, this is something great. But can the city bring it back to us with a little bit more detail? What does it mean to the community, and how can we promote this in our community for all these people we're talking about?
It might be helpful, Councillor, maybe just to take it offline with Suzanne and Donna to pursue.
Okay, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. But something you and we talked about it 10 years ago, and I didn't see it in the report, so that's why I was asking my question about it. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Oh. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. One of the recommended actions that did come through the What We Heard report was how to make the process of getting those degree equivalencies easier. And in the context of the city, how can we help to remove barriers for applying to recognize international experience, which is often seen as a barrier. Just wanted to highlight within what you have seen is a summary of what we heard from our consultations, and it's the anti-advisory table that will help us with starting to translate much of what we heard into what the city can then pursue as recommended actions as part of our strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much for the report and all your work you've done, Suzanne. I want to give a special shout out to Councillor King for his leadership on this. We wouldn't be here without his leadership. I appreciate his expertise and work on this area. It's been, I think this is very important for our city. It's the right direction to go. And we still have much work to do. So it's a great start. I just wanted to talk about intersectionality because we have other issues in terms of the gender lens as well. And I just wanted to know how that fits in to this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We continue to use an intersectional lens throughout our approach in the engagement and in the development of our strategy. We were quite intentional in how we organized our engagement sessions to ensure that not only were we looking very broadly at the experiences of racialized communities, but we're inviting members from racialized communities who identify specifically as women or gender diverse persons to attend a focused session. As an example, in the creation of our anti-advisory table, we took an intersectional lens in the approach of the recruitment of our membership, and certainly many of the recommended actions are paying attention to the interconnected and complex experiences of racialized communities, and we know that complexity increases, based on whether someone identifies as women, and is new to the country, someone that identifies as a woman new to the country living with a disability. So we're paying very close attention to that intersectional lens as we engage with community and as we look to develop any of our recommended actions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I know how complex it is with all these complexities, but it's good to hear that this is being thought out. Yesterday, I had a meeting along with the mayor and Councillor McKenney with the trans community. And one of their requests was to have a designated two-spirited LGBTQ plus secretariat within the city of Ottawa. And I want to know if that is possible to do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're taking some time to assess our approach with equity. Currently, we have our, as you know, our Women and Gender Equity table. We've developed our anti-racism table, and what we want to make sure in our approach is that we have a broad overarching framework, and that we're not siloing much of our equity work because of the intersectionality across communities. And so we are paying attention to the issues of the trans community and the 2S LGBT community, which cross-cuts our current equity tables. And as we look at phase 2 of our women and gender equity strategy, really wanting to focus and highlight some of the recent concerns that have been surfacing in the community, particularly as it relates to the trans hate that you've mentioned.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. In terms of hiring, this is, I think, as a major employer, we can flex muscle because we're a large operation and we have many opportunities. What concrete examples do we have so far in terms of efforts we're making in terms of hiring at this point for programs, particularly for outreach to youth? That is what I'm thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last month or in September, I did have an opportunity to provide an update on our corporate diversity and inclusion plan. And in there, I spoke to many of the outreach initiatives that are underway. Within our service area, we do have a outreach and recruitment specialist that is focused on engaging with community partners, particularly with communities that are not well represented with staff, on staff here at the city. In addition to our outreach, the work that our outreach recruitment specialist is doing, not only with highlighting the city as an employer of choice, is looking at the barriers that communities are experiencing as they're aiming to apply to acquire employment, and looking for ways to remove those barriers, whether that's in relation to job requirements on the job postings that may not necessarily be needed in order to acquire a position, or creating a specific context within the city to create easier channels with submitting resumes. And there's quite a bit of coaching that's happening in the community as well, and looking at ways to simplify language on our job postings. Concurrent to the outreach work that's taking place is the Lead It, the Leverage Equity to Achieve Diversity and Inclusion targets. That's the strategic hiring process that is currently being piloted at the city, and its focus is to increase representation of the employment equity groups. And where we're paying most of our attention with our Lead It strategic hiring process is with our MPE positions or management positions, as well as our single external competitions. So these are just two concrete examples that are taking place where we're focused on improving representation within our employment equity groups here at the city.
I appreciate that very much. I know that the neighborhood ambassador programs are been a big success. And I think that's important in terms of just being on the ground, just talking to people, because I think communications is a big barrier, just reaching those communities. So I appreciate the work that they're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Suzanne, thank you very much for the work that you've done on this, and I'm certain my colleagues will vote in favor of adopting the report. One fairly specific question. I haven't heard a lot about exit interviews. So over the course of the summer, I had the opportunity to sort of facilitate an exit interview for recently retired, relatively senior staff who wasn't offered that when he left the city. Racialized person who wanted to talk about some of his experiences with the city. Is that something that you're looking at to make sure that we're hearing from people who are members of equity seeking groups when they retire or leave the city?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's absolutely something that we'd like to pursue further with our HR colleagues. In fact, we would like to understand the experience of all staff and desegregate that by social identity, and understand what that experience looks like throughout the HR life cycle, from the onboarding process to succession planning, and then to exit of the organization. So indeed, it is something that we'd like to further explore.
Fantastic. That was my only question. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Great, thank you. And to echo Councillor Kavanaugh's comments, thank you, Councillor King, for your leadership on acting as the spark to get this secretariat up and running and the position created of liaison. And to Suzanne and Donna and the entire team, small but mighty, are doing great work, and we look forward to the progress that you've outlined today. So received, colleagues?
Received.
Received.
Thank you. Information previously distributed. Notice the motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. None. Any written inquiries, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Other business? Adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Carried. Carried. Thank you all very much. Merci beaucoup. Meeting adjourned.